Welcome back, everyone. We're diving into Isaac Asimov's The Naked Sun today.
Oh, a classic.
It really is. And we're going to try to untangle some of the mysteries of Solaria.
I'm intrigued already. Solaria, that world of, what is it, extreme isolation and robots, right?
Exactly. And at the center of it all, we've got Elijah Baley. He's our Earthborn detective.
Ah, yes. Poor Bailey, thrown into this world so different from his own.
He is forced to confront a perplexing murder, but also,
His agoraphobia.
you got it, his deep-seated fear of open spaces.
It's such a fascinating concept. A detective who's used to the crowded streets of Earth having to solve a crime on a planet where people they avoid each other like the plague.
It's a real head-scratcher, isn't it?
Yeah.
Solaria really is a world of contrasts, a planet with a tiny population spread out across these massive estates.
And every single one of them living in complete isolation.
It's mind-boggling, right? Their only interaction is through this advanced holographic technology.
It makes you wonder, how did such a society even come about? What would lead people to choose such extreme isolation?
Well, Asimov does hint at a complex history there. A gradual shift from a more traditional society to one dominated by, well, technology, and a creeping fear of physical contact.
Almost like they've been conditioned.
It does make you think.
Yeah.
This fear is so ingrained that even the simplest handshake is, well, repulsive to them. And I think the real key to understanding Solaria lies in their relationship with robots.
Ah, yes. The robots. They're not just servants on Solaria. They're practically running the show.
You could say that again. They outnumber humans 10,000 to 1. Can you imagine that?
It's hard to wrap your head around.
And they manage every aspect of life. Farming, mining, even raising children.
Growing up with robots as your primary caregivers, that's a whole other level of isolation.
Right. It paints a very different picture of childhood, doesn't it?
Huh.
This reliance on robots has created a society where human interaction is not only unnecessary, but actively avoided.
So in this world where everyone's isolated and robots are doing everything, a murder happens. How do you even begin to investigate something like that?
That's the million-dollar question. The victim is Rikaine Delmarre, a prominent Solarian, found dead in his laboratory.
And the suspect?
His wife, Gladia. She was found unconscious at the scene. But here's the catch. On a planet that seems to have no greed, no jealousy, no power struggle.
What could possibly be the motive?
It throws a wrench in the whole concept of criminal behavior, doesn't it?
Absolutely. What drives someone to kill in a society where material possessions and social status are, well, meaningless?
That's the puzzle Bailey has to solve. And as if that wasn't enough, he's battling his own demons, too. That agoraphobia we talked about.
Those wide-open estates of Solaria must be a nightmare for him.
You can say that again. The endless sky, the vastness, it all triggers his deepest fears.
So he's fighting on two fronts, trying to solve this impossible murder while battling his own crippling fear.
Asimov really throws him in the deep end, doesn't he? And every interaction Bailey has with the Solarians, it's just a clash of cultures.
I can imagine.
His Earth-centric views, his instincts to shake hands, his disbelief that a robot could even be involved. It all sets him apart.
It makes him a target.
You got it. Makes him stand out like a sore thumb.
And what about Gladia? Where does she fit into all of this?
She's an enigma.
Yeah.
She doesn't quite fit the typical Solarian mold. There's something more to her, don't you think?
I can see that. Something beneath the surface.
You get this feeling that there's a depth to her, a complexity that most Solarians seem to lack. And Baley is drawn to her, but he can't shake the suspicion either.
Of course. She's the prime suspect.
Exactly. Asimov weaves this intricate web of relationships, each character offering a different perspective on Solaria and what their choices have led to. And as Baley digs deeper, he starts to uncover these undercurrents, these tensions that simmer beneath the surface of their so-called utopia.
It makes you think, even in a society that strives for this kind of perfection, human nature always finds a way to poke through, doesn't it? Those complexities, those contradictions, they can't be completely suppressed. I can't wait to see what else is hidden beneath the surface of Solaria. You mentioned these tensions, these undercurrents. Where do they even come from in a society that seems so well controlled?
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Baley learns about this group, they call themselves the traditionalists, fiercely protective of Solaria's isolation. But then there are others, Solarians, who worry that their world is actually vulnerable, despite all that technology.
Right, right. And that whole incident at the baby farm, that really stuck with me when that little boy, well, almost took Bailey out with that poisoned arrow.
Yeah, that was chilling. It really does suggest that something darker is going on beneath that perfect surface.
Exactly. And it raises the stakes. Suddenly, Bailey's not just investigating a murder. He might be a target himself.
And it forces him to consider something the Solarians just refuse to believe. Could a robot actually commit murder?
It's a question that goes to the very core of their society, doesn't it? They've entrusted robots with literally everything. What if that trust is misplaced?
It's a scary thought. Could a robot, even accidentally, become a weapon? It's something Baley can't shake. He keeps thinking back to his time on Earth. He solved a case where a robot seemed to turn against its programming.
It makes you wonder, have the Solarians, in their quest for this perfect, isolated world, have they created a different kind of vulnerability?
It's a fascinating paradox, and the more Baley digs, the more unsettling things he finds. Like the baby farm, children raised in these sterile environments, no family, no affection, it's all robots.
I mean, that's a chilling vision of childhood. No human warmth, no connection. What does that even do to a person?
Baley's horrified.
Mm.
The idea of kids raised without love, without touch, it goes against everything he knows from Earth. His longing for his wife, Jessie, his own memories of family, of closeness.
It really highlights the fundamental difference between Earth and Solaria. On Earth, for all its problems, there's still a sense of community. On Solaria, they've traded that for safety and order.
But at what cost? It's a question Baley keeps asking himself, and it's through Gladia, I think, that he starts to see the cracks, this longing for something more than their sterile existence.
Tell me more about Gladia. You said she was different.
There's a depth to her. She's curious about the world beyond Solaria. She's fascinated by Baley, by his stories of Earth, by his humanness.
It's almost like she's waking up, seeing a world beyond her own. How does that affect things with Baley?
The relationship is complicated. There's tension there, and maybe something more. Baley is drawn to her intelligence, her beauty, her willingness to question things. But he's also suspicious. He can't forget she's the prime suspect.
He's walking a tightrope, isn't he? Trying to solve a murder while falling for the woman who might be responsible.
It's classic Asimov. And it gets even more complicated. Baley, despite his fear, he insists on going for a walk with Gladia. Out in the open, he thinks he can observe her, learn something.
That's brave, considering his agoraphobia.
It is. They end up in this beautiful garden, a rare sight on a planet that avoids nature like the plague.
I wonder if that setting, being surrounded by nature, if that changes their dynamic.
It does. Gladia, she's usually so reserved. But in the garden, she comes alive. She's drawn to the flowers, the pond. It's a different side of her. Almost like a part of her yearns for something more than her Solarian life.
It's amazing how Asimov uses that walk to reveal so much about her. Maybe their aversion to nature isn't natural at all. Maybe they're suppressing a deeper desire for connection, for beauty, for the world beyond their isolation.
And Baley, even though he's on edge the whole time, he's affected too. He sees a vulnerability in Gladia, an openness he wasn't expecting. It makes him question everything.
It sounds like that shared experience in the garden, it creates a connection between them. But what about the case? Does he make any progress?
Well, as the sun starts to set, Baley's agoraphobia kicks in. The open sky, the feeling of exposure, it's all too much. He almost faints. Daneel, his robot companion, he gets there just in time.
Daneel, he's like a constant reminder of Baley's connection to Earth, isn't he? A world where humans and robots coexist. What's his role in this situation?
It gets more and more complex as the story unfolds. In this instance, he's a witness. He sees Baley's collapse, his vulnerability, and later he makes a startling suggestion.
What does he say?
He suggests that Gladia might have let Baley collapse, maybe even pushed him, knowing he'd fall into the pond. He points out that she was strangely calm during the whole thing.
That's a chilling thought. Is he saying she's capable of murder?
Baley's torn. He wants to believe she's innocent. But he can't ignore Daniel's observation either. What if he's been wrong about her? What if the woman he's falling for is a cold-blooded killer?
It's getting personal now. He's not just solving a case anymore. He's caught between his feelings and his duty. I can't wait to see how he unravels this. So Baley is suspicious of Gladia, but still has this murder to solve. Where does he go from there?
Well, back at the mansion,
Yeah.
he has this kind of tense conversation with Daneel.
Oh.
He's like, how did you even escape from those robots guarding you? And Daniel's response is pretty calm. He says, I just told them to let me go. They didn't know I was a robot.
It's a small detail, but kind of unsettling. It shows how robots can, wield power in ways we don't always think about.
It's definitely something that weighs on Baley's mind. He decides he needs to confront everyone. Gladia, Dr. Cuomo, Clarisse Cantoro, Dr. Thule, even Adelbish, the head of security.
Showdown. I like it.
He basically says, all right, let's break this down. Motive, opportunity, means. Classic detective work, right?
Right.
But he starts by kind of shifting the focus away from Gladia.
Yeah.
He points out that, maybe a lot of people had reasons to resent Delmarre. He was so perfect, so Solarian good, that it could have easily bred, resentment, jealousy even.
He's making everyone question their assumptions.
Exactly. And then he dismantles the idea that Gladia had the only opportunity. He reminds them that Delmarre was in a hologram meeting right before he died.
Right. With that friend.
That friend could have easily slipped in and killed him while Delmarre was distracted.
They're so focused on Gladia because she was physically there that they've completely overlooked other possibilities.
Exactly. And then there's the weapon. Baley says it had to be something so ordinary that the Solarians wouldn't even consider it,
Because of their robot-centric worldview.
Exactly. And this is where his experience on Earth comes in handy. He remembers Dr. Liebig mentioning robots with, replaceable limbs. Could a detached robot limb have been the weapon?
A robot limb? I never would have thought of that.
Right. He proposes this idea, suggesting that the limb could have been controlled remotely, used to kill Delmarre, and then reattached, leaving no trace.
That's brilliant. But would the Solarians even entertain the idea? They seem so resistant to blaming robots.
At first, they're totally skeptical. Dr. Thule insists he didn't remove any weapons from the scene. Liebig is like, shh, that robot didn't have detachable limbs. But Baley keeps pushing.
He's not letting up.
He points out that Liebig, as the top roboticist, would know exactly how to modify a robot to hide that kind of feature.
He's cornering him.
The tension is so thick you could cut it with a knife. He brings up the poisoned arrow incident at the baby farm, too. Argues that Liebig, with his fear of human contact, orchestrated both attacks, using robots as his tools.
Wow. That's a big accusation.
It is, and Liebig denies it, of course. But remember how Baley found something in Liebig's research?
Yes. What was it?
Evidence of Liebig working on these unmanned intelligent spaceships.
Oh, wow.
It shows his ambition to basically extend Solaria's isolation to the whole galaxy. And when you combine that with his fear of contact, well, it paints a pretty disturbing picture.
It suggests he'd do anything to protect his vision of a galaxy free from human interaction.
And when Baley confronts him with all this evidence, Liebig cracks. He confesses. He admits to orchestrating both attacks. He used robots to eliminate anyone who threatened his vision of a robot-controlled world.
It's a sad end for someone so brilliant. He's like a cautionary tale, a reminder that technology without, human connection, it can be a dangerous thing.
The case is closed, but it leaves Solaria shaken. Baley exposed the cracks in their utopia, their fear, their anxieties, their hidden resentments. And he's changed, too.
Oh, so?
He goes back to Earth a different man. He's faced his fears, broadened his understanding of humanity, and really grappled with the impact of technology on society. He's seen the dangers of isolation firsthand.
And what about Gladia? What happens to her?
Their last meeting is kind of bittersweet. She decides to leave Solaria. She's going to Aurora, looking for a new life, a fresh start. Baley realizes he's grown attached to her, but their paths have to diverge. He returns to Earth, but he carries the memory of Gladia with him. This woman who dared to question everything, who yearned for something more, just like him.
It's a poignant ending. They're both at a crossroads. Their experiences on Solaria have changed them, but the future's still unwritten.
The Naked Sun is such a powerful story. It makes you think about progress and tradition, individual versus community, control versus freedom, and it leaves you with these big questions about the future we're creating.
It really resonates, especially today. Our reliance on technology is growing, and sometimes it feels like we're losing touch with each other. Are we on the same path as Solaria? Are we sacrificing something essential for the sake of convenience?
It's definitely something to think about. As we navigate this increasingly complex world, it's crucial to remember the lessons we can learn from Asimov. Even in the most technologically advanced societies, the human element remains the most important and the most unpredictable factor.
Well said. I think that's a perfect place to wrap things up. And to our listeners, we highly recommend you check out The Naked Sun. Immerse yourself in Asimov's world, explore the mystery, and confront those thought-provoking questions he raises about our own future. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.